So there's one other part of the prelude I should mention, and that is my ex filled my head with a lot of ideas while I was married to him. He'd say things like, with all these glass windows, anybody who wanted to shoot us could just aim from 2 miles away. A sharpshooter could shoot us through these windows without even getting close. He'd say, I could hack our internet from parking out down the street, and just from the IP address I could get in and I could see anything you're doing. Or if I wanted to get in the garage, all I'd have to do is lift the door up. I'm strong enough. He was really strong. He'd say, you don't need a garage door opener to get in the door, and the locks on the garage, they wouldn't stop me. If anyone wanted to break in here, they could break in here. They wouldn't, if they really want to get in, they could get in. They wouldn't need a key. Or you can't possibly ever hide a spare key anywhere where I couldn't find it. Or, he'd set all these things up in my head. So when I finally had the courage to get divorced from him, I was in therapy with a woman who had seen both of us for a little while. It started off, we were doing like couples therapy because I kept trying to make it work. And I thought it was an alcohol problem, and that if he could just cure the alcohol problem, he would be a nice person. But I realize now he is a bad person, and there are bad people, and alcohol had nothing to do with it. In fact, my therapist told me afterwards, she apologized to me for thinking it was just an alcohol problem and that I was codependent, when really I was being manipulated to look that way. And although he had a drinking problem, the real problem was that she said, look up the words malignant and narcissist. And so I looked these two words up. I got shocked because I had lived with this man for so long, and it said mass murderer, Hitler, really dangerous people. And I'm like, he was in my house. He had access to my food. He was my caregiver. He was giving me pills. He was, I didn't sign over this one thing, my house, to him, because I kept thinking, if I sign everything over to him, he won't need me to stay alive anymore. Because I kind of figured out he was trying to kill me in the end. But I never truly believed it until I heard malignant narcissist and looked it up. And I suddenly realized it was like this horrible realization that I had been living with a murderer and that he had been trying to kill me this whole time. I look back on all the events during our marriage. Well, here I was getting divorced from him, and the most dangerous time is right after you separate. That's the most dangerous time for a woman. So I'm living in this house with all these glass windows that anybody can see in, and I know he's a hacker, so I can't go anywhere because he would find me and it wouldn't matter. Also, I had no money to move or to go to another house. I had another house, a rental house that I'd kept sort of like a safe house, but over time it was depleting my money to maintain this house, and it wasn't making a lot of money. So I ended up selling it at the bottom of the market. So I didn't have a house to go to. So I was in the house, and I just thought, if I just act like I'm not scared, I won't encourage him, because he really gets off on scaring people. So if I just act like nothing's fazed me and I just stay in the house and live my life, then I should be fine. He should lose interest eventually. Well, he called me like 150 times after I got a restraining order telling him not to call me. And I would not realize it was him, and I'd pick up because he'd call from different phones, or he'd have the blocked number. And one time he called, I got some police reports I was trying to get a restraining order, so I ordered all these police reports to prove that I had a case against him so that I would get the restraining order. And I never really read them. And I eventually was looking at the police reports, and it said he had a gun. And I didn't know he ever had a gun, and I was completely freaked out by this. It was a handgun. So one of the times he called, I actually thought, I'd be safer finding out if he had a handgun, because I looked everywhere throughout the house. When I separated from him, he was out of the country, so he couldn't have taken the handgun on an airplane. So it had to be there somewhere. So I asked him, what did you do with the gun? I said, it's illegal for you to have a gun. If I have a restraining order against you. He says, oh, I don't have it anymore. I took it apart and threw it in the trash, which is so clearly a lie that he was like baiting me with that. So I thought he had a gun, or maybe it was in the house somewhere. I tore the whole place apart. I looked under drawers. I looked everywhere. But actually, I realize now, I didn't do that right away when I got divorced from him. It was later when I realized he had had a gun. Well, he could have come in and gotten it. There was no evidence of him coming in our house, but there were these weird things happening. Like, I had all the proof of the abuse on memory sticks and things, and it was all organized. I had all my papers on my desk, and I had more papers in the garage. There was this one time I came home, and I went to get my paperwork together for my divorce, and the disk drives were gone. And I thought, gosh, I have the worst ADD. Where did I put them? And I never found them. Another time I went in the garage, and I had this whole box full of documents proving my separate property interest in my house. The box was gone. And I didn't think anything of it because I just couldn't believe that a person would actually do that. I thought these were idle threats he had made. So me and the kids were living there, and we had these outdoor lights because we had a very large, dark backyard and no street lights really to speak of. So one day, I'm looking out the window at night, and it's pitch black out there, and none of the lights are on, and they're automatic. And I thought, well, that's funny. They're on a timer. They should be going off. So I called the pool guy to come look at them, and he came the following week, and he said somebody unplugged them. I plugged them back in. Now they work. So I didn't think anything of it. A week later, they went out again, and I thought, well, now they're really shorted out or something. So I went out there, and I looked, and I was like shaking inside, just going out in my backyard, feeling like he could be around me somewhere watching. There was a hill above us, and somebody could park on that hill and look through the hedge and see us. And I went and I looked, and it was unplugged again. And I thought, well, maybe my neighbor's unplugging it. Maybe it's shining in his house or something. So I still didn't think it was the ex until I had a problem with the alarm. The alarm kept having false alarms. The alarm kept having false alarms. The police would come. And the third time they came, they said, we're going to have to bill you for the call. It's going to be $500 for wasting our time. You have to get this alarm fixed. And I had been talking to the alarm company, and they couldn't figure out why there were all these false alarms. So I told them, please disconnect the alarm. Well, I had some other problems with electricity. So I went around to the circuit box, and I looked. I had locked it with a key and a padlock, and the lock was broken. And I realized somebody had been in the circuit box, and the phone jack was unplugged for the alarm. And I realized at that point that it was probably my ex messing with my alarm. Well, why would he mess with my alarm unless he wanted to come in my house? I was kind of terrified there for a while, thinking he was going to come in my house and try to get us. But I think he must have come in and taken all those things. So then one day I came home, and I went to sit on my chair at my desk where I always paid all my bills. And he knew I always sat there every day, and I just plunked down in my chair. And the chair flew back because the seat of the chair was on a caster, a thing with wheels, and it just completely disconnected. And I caught myself, but there was a stone floor there. I could have, and behind the stone floor was the stairs going downstairs. I could have hit my head on the stone floor or fallen down the stairs. And I thought, that's really weird that that chair collapsed like that. So I took a really good look at the bottom. And where the screws went in, there were 4 places where screws went in, sets of 3 screws each. There were 0 screws in the chair. None. So no screws on the floor. There was no way that would have happened just randomly and the screws disappear. I thought somebody came in to my house and unscrewed the screws from the bottom of the chair. It just seems too ridiculous, you know? I tried to report it to the police, and they just were like, well, what evidence do you have that someone was in your house? And I didn't. So meanwhile, the sprinkler in the front is always going haywire and spraying on the porch, and I'm sick of it. It's been happening for weeks. So finally I go to fix the sprinkler, and the sprinkler head is actually bent down, like dramatically. So I thought, well, something must have stepped on it. I mean, it's inside a cement box planter. So there's almost no way that could get bent unless someone specifically stamped on it right there. So then I realized I had a secret key hidden in a fake sprinkler head that looked just like that sprinkler head. And I figured my ex must have thought that that was the fake key and was like trying to wrench it out. So then one of the worst things that happened is it was summertime. We had the windows open, I think. Turned on the tap. We had a water filter that we would Brita water filter. We'd filter the water and get a big drink of water. And it tasted super bitter. And I spit it out right away. It came from the tap. And I called my neighbors. They didn't have bitter water. And I think I asked somebody else to taste it to see if it was that I was crazy, but we were afraid to, like, I didn't die from tasting it. So I thought, but it was super, super bitter. And the water comes into the house. In front of the house, there's like a little cement cover, and you can open it, and there's access to the water system. And I thought maybe my ex had tampered with our water. So all this time I'm like telling my attorneys this, and they think I'm crazy. They think I'm like a lunatic, super paranoid or something. But this is exactly the kind of thing that would do. Exactly. So I think that the most scary part of all of that, of everything he did, was not really any of the things he did. It was the moment I really truly realized what he was capable of, and I looked back and I saw what I had been living with. That was the most frightening thing. And I was not even in danger anymore. I was in danger. And knowing he was out there somewhere and I didn't really know where. And so then he stole my identity. I found out about this thing called Credit Karma, and my friend said I should sign up, and I did, and it said, you already have an account. So I went to look, what is the email? And sure enough, it was my ex-husband's email. So I did something illegal. I hacked him back just to see where the hell he was and what he was doing. And not proud of it. Me and the kids kind of developed PTSD after he left because we all were so jumpy about him coming back and doing things to us. He still loved to mess with us. We had a Tesla, and it had an app where you could open and shut the windows remotely and things like that. And he would make things happen in the garage, and we were like, he's in the garage. We hear him in the garage. And then we figured out it was just the app, so we had him booted off the app. So one day we go to this party. It's 2 blocks away, and we're trying so hard to get over our PTSD, and we're like, we're gonna walk to this party. It's down the hill. We don't have many streetlights in my neighborhood, but it's a pretty safe neighborhood, and we know all the neighbors. So we walk down the hill and then 1 block into their house, and we go to their party. It was really good, really nice, and we go to walk home. I go first, and my kids are gonna come later because they wanted to stay, and I was really tired. So I said, I'm going to go home, and I'll see you guys when you get there. So we're all being independent now, and we're getting over our PTSD, and I'm walking in the dark, and I see out in the front yard a friend, and I stopped and I talked to them for a while, and then I walk home. Well, I get there, and my kids are there, and they're panicking. Apparently, they went right after I did, and they walked up to the house, and I wasn't there. And they said, we thought got you. We thought you were murdered. And we just had this major, major attack of panic. Everybody did. And for years, we had PTSD from that guy. That's why I think that the living can be much more scary than the dead.